Now that we have talked about completing the square, let's look at what we can do with it and why we even need to know how to use it. I love introducing new concepts, but I notice that a lot of people's eyes glaze over and they're like, well, that's a nice trick. What's the point? Well, I'm going to show you the point of how this works, and the bottom line is that it's a really powerful tool in solving quadratic equations when things aren't necessarily factorable or we're not seeing a way to do it. And this whole chapter is all about finding different tools to use for solving these things. So this is just another tool for that. So let's just dive into something here. So I've got this equation. It's x squared minus 6x plus 12 equals 19. Now, the problem with it is if I move this 19 over here, right, and I wind up with, x squared minus 6x, and then if you subtract 19, I get negative 2. I get something that I can't really solve because there's no factors of 2. The only factors of 2 are 2 and 1 that are going to add up in any way, shape, or form to give me negative 6, right? So it's just not going to happen. What completing the square allows us to do is it allows us to kind of tinker around with it in another way and then come up with a different way to solve it, and I think it's very useful. So the very first step in completing the square that I'm going to teach you for most of these problems is that we want to keep any of our x terms over on this side, and then we want any of the existing numbers right now all over on the other side. So the very first thing we're going to do with this is we're going to get rid of this 12, and we're going to move it over by the 19. And so that's going to leave you with x squared minus 6x, and I'm going to purposely leave this space here so we can complete this. And then 19 minus 12 gives me 2. All right? So the next step now is let's mess around with this completing the square. So when I complete the square here, remember the trick is, all right, and you're still pretty new to this, so I'll give you lots of review, is we're going to take negative 6 and we're going to divide it, we're going to cut it in half or divide it by 2, and we get negative 3. And then you take that negative 3 and then you square it. All right? And so we are going to square that. And then that is the number you add in, right? So you get plus 9. Now, here's the thing. This is algebra. I have a balanced equation. And whenever you have a balanced equation, if you do something to one side, you have to do something to the other side. So let's look at what we just did. Well, I added 9 just out of nowhere, seemingly, to this equation, which is fine as long as I do it to this side too. So if I added 9 here, I got to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to add 9 over here. And what that does is that keeps the equation balanced. All right? So when I do that, this side goes down. We're going to factor this to x minus 3 squared. And then 2 plus 9 is 11. And hopefully you can kind of see where this is going. Now, I know how to solve an equation like this from the last lesson. I use the square root property, all right? So I'm going to take the square root of x minus 3 squared. And then because I'm taking the square root of this side, I'm going to separate this so it doesn't look like it's part of what we're doing. Because I'm taking the square root of this side, I'm going to take the square root of this side. All right? And what that gives me is that gives me x minus 3 by itself over here. And that gives me plus and minus square root of 11. And then we're going to simplify this right away because we need to use this. So we are going to put 11 in some sort of calculating device. I'm going to take the square root. I think they want you to do things to the nearest tenths on this. So this number is 3.3, about. All right, it's not exactly, but it's about 3.3. So that means I have x minus 3 is equal to plus and minus 3.3. So you have two things. You have two equations here. Now you've got x minus 3 is equal to the positive case. Then you've got x minus 3 is equal to the negative case. All right, so for the positive case, you add 3 to both sides. And then you get x is equal to 6.3. And then you're going to add it to both of these as well. And then you're going to get x is equal to negative 0.3. And these are your two answers. And you were able to find this through completing the square. And you notice that we can do these because these things don't factor out nicely. And you're going to learn another way to deal with things that don't factor out nicely in the next lesson, which is a big hairy formula called the quadratic formula. But I kind of like this. I like this completing the square because I think it makes sense and it's pretty straightforward and you don't really have to remember a formula. All right, let's try one more example here. So x squared minus 12x plus 3 equals 8. So same deal. Let's get this x squared and the 12x by itself on this side. And in order to do that, I have to get rid of this 3. So let's subtract 3 from both sides, and that gives you x squared minus 12x equals 5. Now, take your negative 12. I'm going to do this a little more off to the side. Divide it by 2, and that gives you negative 6. And then you need to take that, and you need to square it. So negative 6 squared is 36. All right, and because I've now just out of nowhere added 36 to this side, that's okay, provided I do the same thing to the other side. So now I've got 41 over here, and then I've got x minus 6 squared, quantity squared over here. All right, our next step is our square root step. And that gives you x minus 6 plus and minus square root of 41. Pop 41 into your calculator, and you get x minus 6 is equal to plus and minus 6.4 approximately. So your two cases will give you x minus 6 is equal to the positive case, and then you have x minus 6 is equal to the negative case. And you're going to get answers, not that far off from what you had for the last one. So plus 6, so x is either equal to 12.4 or x is equal to, well, if you add 6 to negative 6.4, you get negative 0.4. And these are your two solutions to this. And we have figured this out. And this is, like I said, a very useful tool to have for solving situations when you have quadratic trinomials that are not factorable.